Welcome to Hazardous Waste Training at Naturich Labs. This training is designed to help you understand how to safely identify, handle, store, and dispose of hazardous waste in compliance with federal, state, and company regulations. Proper hazardous waste management protects not only your safety but the safety of your team, our community, and the environment. Whether you work in production, maintenance, sanitation, or any support area, knowing the right steps to take can prevent accidents, fines, and environmental damage. Let's get started. In this training, we'll cover the key elements of hazardous waste management under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA. We'll walk through what RCRA is, why it matters, and how it applies to your role here at Naturich Labs. You'll learn how to recognize hazardous waste, understand generator responsibilities, and follow best practices for handling and storing waste safely. We'll also cover universal waste, used oil, reporting requirements, and what to do in an emergency. By the end of this course, you'll be better prepared to keep yourself, your coworkers, and our environment safe. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, better known as RCRA, was enacted in 1976 to address the growing concern over hazardous waste. It amended the earlier Solid Waste Disposal Act of 1965, strengthening our nation's approach to waste management. RCRA is all about protecting people and the environment from the dangers of chemical waste. It encourages recycling and energy conservation while pushing for smarter, safer ways to handle materials. One of its most important contributions is the concept of cradle to grave, meaning the generator of a hazardous waste is responsible for it from the moment it's created until it's properly disposed of. At Naturich Labs, we take that responsibility seriously. The RCRA wasn't created in a vacuum, it was driven by disasters that exposed serious gaps in waste regulation. One of the most infamous cases was Love Canal, New York. Starting in 1941, Hooker Chemical dumped hazardous waste into an old canal. By the 1950s, homes and a school were built on the site. Over the next 2 decades, toxic chemicals began surfacing, causing illnesses and environmental damage. Culminated in a national emergency in the late 1970s. Then came Times Beach, Missouri. In an effort to control dust on dirt roads, a chemical company mixed waste from Agent Orange production into oil and sprayed it over entire neighborhoods. The oil was loaded with dioxin, one of the most toxic chemicals known. People got sick. Animals died. The government eventually evacuated the entire town. These tragedies and others forced lawmakers to act. RCRA was born from the need to prevent disasters like these from ever happening again. Back in 1975 and 1976, hazardous waste disposal looked very different and far more dangerous. Nearly half of all waste went into unlined surface impoundments, which allowed chemicals to leach into the soil and groundwater. About 30% went to landfills or pits with little oversight, and only 6% was incinerated using any sort of control. Fast forward to today, and we've come a long way. Hazardous waste is now treated through regulated methods like high-temperature incinerators, cement kilns that recover energy, and certified recyclers who specialize in safely reclaiming materials. Other advanced treatment options like chemical neutralization and waste solidification also help us manage waste in safer, more sustainable ways. RCRA is what drove this progress, putting strict controls in place so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. According to RCRA, a material becomes a solid waste when it's no longer usable and is discarded. That doesn't mean it has to be physically solid, it could be a liquid, a gas, or even sludge. Solid waste includes garbage, scrap materials, off-spec products, and anything you're planning to throw away, burn, store indefinitely, or abandon. One key detail: if you're keeping unused chemicals, you must be able to justify that they're still usable, otherwise they may be considered waste under the law. Now, just because something is solid waste doesn't automatically mean it's hazardous. But every hazardous waste starts its life as solid waste, so identifying it properly is the first step in managing it safely. Not every solid waste is hazardous, but every hazardous waste must first be considered a solid waste. A waste becomes hazardous when its quantity, concentration, or properties make it dangerous to human health or the environment, especially if it's handled improperly. Under RCRA, there are two main ways a waste can be defined as hazardous. First, if it exhibits a hazardous characteristic like being ignitable, corrosive, reactive, or toxic. Second, if it's a listed waste based on its source or chemical composition as categorized under the F, K, U, or P lists. Even waste created by treating other hazardous waste or materials that contain hazardous waste still count. Knowing the category a waste falls into helps determine how it must be stored, labeled, and disposed of, and that's a key part of keeping Naturich Labs safe and compliant. When we talk about characteristic waste, we're referring to wastes that fall under 4 specific hazardous traits, each with its own EPA code. D001 is for ignitable waste, anything with a flash point below 140 degrees Fahrenheit. These are materials that can catch fire easily, like many solvents or alcohol-based chemicals. D002 is corrosive waste with pH values below 2 or above 12.5. Think sulfuric acid or strong caustic cleaners, things that can eat through metal. D003 is for reactive waste, which includes chemicals that explode or react violently when exposed to air or water, not something we want loose in the plant. Finally, D004 through D043 cover toxic waste. These are substances that can leach out and harm human health or the environment. Heavy metals, pesticides, and certain organics fall into this group. If you see these codes on a label, treat the material with serious caution. They're regulated under RCRA and must be handled correctly. In addition to the characteristic wastes, the EPA has identified specific wastes on what are known as the F, K, U, and P lists. The F list includes wastes from common processes across many industries, things like spent solvents or wastewater treatment sludge. K list is more specific. It includes waste from 13 defined industries such as pesticide manufacturing, petroleum refining, and metal processing. The U list and P list both deal with unused commercial chemical products that are being discarded. U list chemicals are still hazardous but not as toxic, for example, naphthalene. P list chemicals, on the other hand, are acutely hazardous. Just a small amount can pose a serious threat. One example is zinc cyanide. And remember, for a waste to fall under the U or P list, the chemical must be unused and discarded in its original form. Hazardous waste regulations aren't one size fits all. They're based on how much waste you generate in a month. All generators must have an EPA ID number and follow the rules for their size category. If your facility generates over 2,200 pounds a month, you're a large quantity generator, or LQG. These sites have the strictest regulations. If you're producing between 220 and 2,200 pounds, you're a small quantity generator, or SQG, still regulated but with a few less requirements. If you generate less than 220 pounds a month, you fall under conditionally exempt small quantity generator status, but only if you stay under the 2,200 pound on-site storage cap. There are also separate rules for TSDFs, transporters, and universal waste handlers. Each has its own set of responsibilities, and knowing where you fall helps ensure you're compliant and protected. Here at Naturich, understanding our generator category keeps us aligned with EPA regulations and avoids costly violations. Once you know your generator status, you're locked into a set of EPA requirements based on the amount and type of waste your facility produces. First, you need to accurately identify and profile every hazardous waste you generate. That means knowing what it is, how it's created, and how it should be managed. Next, follow strict storage rules. Containers must be stored safely, with secondary containment, security measures, and leak detection systems in place. Once a container is full, you've got 90 days to get it off-site. You also need to perform and document inspections, ensure proper labeling, and complete annual training for anyone handling hazardous waste. When it's time to ship waste, you'll need to follow DOT regulations and complete hazardous waste manifests to track every movement. Finally, LQGs are required to have a waste minimization program, and all waste must be profiled correctly before treatment or recycling. These aren't just suggestions, they're critical parts of staying compliant and protecting the environment, your coworkers, and yourself. Proper container management is one of the biggest make or break points in hazardous waste compliance. Always check your drum before use. It needs to be clean, undamaged, and compatible with the waste you're storing. For example, corrosives go in plastic, ignitables in steel. Before you add anything to a container, confirm it's the right one. And once you start using it, keep it closed at all times unless you're actively adding waste. A funnel can be used, but only if it's part of a closed system that prevents spills. When a drum is full, leave some headspace, date the label, and move it to the 90-day storage area within 3 days. No leaks. No drips. No excuses. Everything should be in secondary containment, and wastes must be segregated by compatibility to prevent dangerous reactions. And finally, if you empty a drum and want to reuse or recycle it, it must be RCRA empty, which usually means rinsed unless it held something reactive or too dangerous to clean safely. Following these rules keeps our site safe, compliant, and incident-free. Satellite accumulation areas, or SAAs, are used to collect hazardous waste right where it's generated before it's moved to central storage. The rules are specific. The area must be at or near the point of generation and under the control of the operator working with the material. That means no random drop-off points. The person using the chemical is responsible for managing the waste. All containers must be labeled with the contents, kept closed, and ideally stored in secondary containment to prevent spills. These areas should be inspected regularly for issues. Now here's the critical part: you can't store unlimited amounts. The EPA allows up to 55 gallons of hazardous waste or 1 quart of P-listed acute hazardous waste. Once you hit that limit or the container is full, you've got 3 days to date the label and move it to the 90-day storage area. Following these rules avoids fines, protects the team, and keeps the site running smoothly. The 90-day storage area is where full hazardous waste containers are staged until they're ready for shipment, and the rules here are strict. Once the container is full and dated, it has 90 days to be shipped off-site. No exceptions. Every drum must be properly labeled with the words hazardous waste, include any relevant EPA waste codes, and have DOT-compliant labels for transportation. All containers must be dated, and labels must be facing outward and clearly visible. You cannot stack or store them in a way that obstructs labeling. The storage area must maintain 2 feet of aisle space for easy inspection access. You are required to inspect the 90-day storage area every 7 days, checking for leaks, damaged containers, missing labels, or anything out of place. And finally, don't miss the deadline: waste must be shipped by day 90. That's not a recommendation, it's a federal requirement. Let's compare the 2 types of hazardous waste storage areas used at Naturich Labs. A satellite accumulation area, or SAA, is a temporary storage area near where the waste is generated. It's under the operator's control and can hold up to 55 gallons of hazardous waste or 1 quart of P-listed waste. There's no time limit, but once you hit those volume limits or fill the container, the clock starts. That's when it gets moved to the 90-day accumulation area. This is a centralized location with no volume cap but strict time and inspection requirements. Waste must be shipped out within 90 days of being dated, and the area must be inspected weekly. Both areas must be labeled, secured, and managed properly, but the level of compliance and oversight increases significantly once the waste moves from the satellite location to the 90-day area. Anyone at Naturich Labs who interacts with hazardous waste, whether you're labeling a drum, signing a manifest, or just moving a container, is considered a RCRA employee and must be trained. Your training will cover RCRA law basics, our specific waste procedures, and what to do in an emergency. Even though our current waste is classified as non-regulated, it's still essential we follow best practices to avoid spills, violations, or harm. Training is required within 6 months of your assignment to hazardous waste duties and must be renewed every year. Everyone must also sign their RCRA job description to confirm they understand their responsibilities. Training can be done in the classroom, online, or on the job, but however it's delivered, it must be documented. If it's not on record, it didn't happen, at least in the eyes of an inspector. In laboratory settings, hazardous waste can come in many forms, and it's critical to manage each type correctly. Lab packs are used for small containers of chemicals like HPLC vials, partially full bottles, or old samples. These are consolidated into drums and shipped for disposal. Liquid lab waste, such as solvents from HPLC units or neutralized acids and bases, should be collected in compatible containers and labeled properly. Never mix incompatible liquids, even if the volume is small. And don't forget about contaminated solids, used gloves, weigh boats, or anything that's been in contact with hazardous material. These all count as regulated waste if they could leach chemicals. All lab waste must be handled with the same care as production waste. Label it, contain it, and manage it according to RCRA rules. Used oil is any petroleum or synthetic oil that's been used and, through that use, has become contaminated with things like dirt, metals, water, or chemicals. It's not trash, it's a recyclable material. But only if it's not mixed with hazardous waste. If you mix even a little bit of hazardous waste into used oil, you've got a regulated hazardous waste on your hands. That's why it must be clearly labeled as used oil, never waste oil. That one word makes a huge legal difference. You also have to know what's in it. Whether it's brake fluid, solvent residue, or water, recyclers need that info to handle it properly and safely. Naturich Labs, we recycle our used oil, but only when it's managed the right way. Universal waste is a special category of hazardous waste that includes materials commonly found in workplaces, labs, and homes. The rules are less strict, which makes it easier to recycle these items, but they still need to be managed properly. Common universal wastes include used lamps, batteries, mercury-containing devices, and certain pesticides. Lamps must be unbroken and stored in containers that are closed and labeled. Batteries should have their terminals taped to prevent sparks, and mercury devices must be sealed and labeled. For pesticides, only those that are part of an approved collection program qualify. Even though the rules are more relaxed, failure to follow them can still lead to violations, so treat universal waste with the same respect you'd give to regulated hazardous waste. Universal waste may have less strict rules than hazardous waste, but it still has firm requirements. All containers must be sturdy and compatible with the waste, sealed when not in use, and kept in good condition. The label must clearly identify what's inside, like used lamps or used batteries, and must be visible and legible at all times. As soon as you start filling a container with universal waste, you must write the date on it. From that moment, the clock starts. You've got less than 1 year to send it off for recycling or disposal. Following these simple rules makes compliance easy and keeps us out of trouble with both state and federal regulators. Some waste streams don't fall neatly into universal or traditional hazardous waste categories, but that doesn't mean they're risk-free. Electronics, for example, often contain heavy metals and circuit board chemicals. If you're not recycling them, they must be treated as hazardous waste. The same goes for oil-based paints, lacquers, and aerosol cans. These are ignitable, pressurized, and often toxic. Paint waste is not just trash. Ballasts from older light fixtures can contain PCBs, a banned substance that requires special handling. Even contaminated wipes used with solvents are regulated. If you send them out for laundering or approved disposal, they may fall under EPA's contaminated wipes exclusion, but you still have to store and track them properly. And one more thing, don't just assume your recycler is doing it right. Do your due diligence. You are legally responsible for that waste from cradle to grave, even after it leaves our facility. As a large quantity generator, Naturich Labs is required by law to have a hazardous waste contingency plan in place, and part of that includes designating an emergency coordinator. That person must be either on site or available by phone at all times in case of a spill, fire, or other emergency involving hazardous waste. At Naturich, your emergency coordinator is Michael McNutt, Safety Manager 25422888025. In every area where hazardous waste is stored or handled, you must have the following posted: the emergency coordinator's name and number, the location of fire extinguishers, spill control materials, and fire alarms, the phone number of the local fire department, Unless your alarm system connects directly, these postings aren't just red tape. They save lives, protect property, and keep us in full compliance. Naturich Labs, minimizing waste isn't just about following the rules, it's about running cleaner, smarter, and safer operations. One way we do that is through process modifications, fine-tuning how we work to generate less waste in the first place. We also look for opportunities to substitute hazardous chemicals with safer alternatives that get the job done without posing the same risks. Regular preventive maintenance helps us avoid leaks, breakdowns, and the need to discard materials due to equipment failure. Finally, we may reuse packaging materials, but only once and only when it's safe and appropriate. Beyond that, reuse can pose contamination risks and compliance issues. These strategies aren't just best practices, they also help reduce costs, improve safety, and show that Naturich takes environmental responsibilities seriously. Record keeping is one of the most important parts of hazardous waste compliance, and it's often where audits start. As a large quantity generator, Naturich Labs must submit a biennial waste report every 2 years. This includes details like how much hazardous waste we generate, profiles for new or modified waste streams, drum storage activity, where our waste goes, and who ships it. In addition, we must keep key records for a minimum of 3 years, including shipping manifests, land disposal restriction notifications, waste generation logs, all training records, waste profiles and analysis documents, our waste minimization efforts. Keeping accurate and organized records doesn't just keep us compliant, it also protects us during inspections and helps track areas where we can improve. Naturich Labs' hazardous waste management isn't just about regulations, it's about protecting people, property, and the planet. Your actions matter. Whether you're labeling a drum or cleaning up a small spill, you play a vital role in keeping our workplace safe and compliant. Thank you for your time, attention, and commitment to safety. Questions? Contact Michael McNutt, Safety Manager, 2542288025.